In this business, I think one of the main challenges that we run into with insurance adjusters, okay, is we don't pay for that. That's not covered. That's not covered under the policy. The policy says this, the policy says that. Well, if you don't know anything about me, really what I'm gonna be talking about and what my content is really based around is looking through the eyes of the contractor. I think the contractor actually really does have the most power, and people really take issue with that when I say that. But they take issue with that because they're like, oh, the contractor should never be talking about certain things. The contractor shouldn't be talking about the price. The contractor shouldn't be allowed to identify damage. The contractor shouldn't even go out there and talk to the adjuster at all. By the way, none of those things are true. None of those things are true. Those are all myths, and I wish people would stop listening to that nonsense. I think it's nonsense. We have one arm tied behind our back with the adjuster, right? I have the equalizer, the neutralizer that gives you that advantage back, that I'm telling you, levels things out with the adjusters, and that's the building codes, guys. It's the building codes. And one of the main reasons for that, it's an arbitrage. It's a weakness in the game because the adjusters don't know anything about building codes, guys. They don't know jack about building codes. Who all here is an insurance adjuster? You work as an insurance adjuster? Okay, great. And I'm not gonna put you on the spot too much. Thank you. And you're an insurance adjuster now? Yeah. Oh, anybody here an attorney? Any attorneys here? One attorney? Oh, two attorneys. Great. Awesome. Welcome, brother. So I believe every job site, to me, is like a crime scene that must be investigated. You know, like think CSI, right? Like the whole place has to be dusted for prints. You know, I want to go there and identify the items that are missing from the Xactimate estimate in the first place. See, they're missing items from the estimate. Remember, that's the problem. That's why the estimate's short. Now, it may be that they have seen all of the damage, they know about what needs to be done, but they're still missing items from the estimate. I let you know what to expect throughout the day. We're going to take a lunch from 12 to 1, right? That's like the main break of the day. And it's going to be a great lunch, too. They're bringing a microphone for me, too, so you can hear me louder, but I'll try to project until then. So we'll have a morning break also, like 10, 15 minutes, like late morning. Then there'll be that lunch. The lunch is going to be awesome. It'll be in a separate area. And we'll take another break or two in the afternoon. We'll go till 5. So you feel free to get up and use the restroom and have coffee and things like that, or whatever you need. Take a phone call. It's mostly casual, but it's we're gonna do questions throughout the day. Like in the morning, it kind of takes a little bit to build up the foundation. More and more value comes as we go. So people don't usually ask a lot of questions in the beginning. But if you do, feel free. That's when it gets good. I've done 108 or 109 of these events. So I have, an agenda, a specific agenda, a route that I sort of follow throughout the day, a map, if you will. But I do tend to take side streets, and I'll come back. I will get back on that main road. But I think every event is different. I think that's why a lot of people come back. Every event is unique in the sense that we get all these professionals together and awesome questions start rolling in, and that usually gives a whole new bunch of content and learning content. So I'm really excited about having this many people here. It's been a while since I've been up in this area. We did the Silver Spring location the last time I was here, and it was a good location. I wanted to go back. But this thing just kept growing, and we had to move. So if this is far or if it caused anybody inconvenience, sorry about that. It was inconvenient for us too, and I wish we could have kept it the same place. But I think it's going to go good. Now listen, you guys, if you haven't heard already, you'll get access. You should have already gotten access actually to the okay. You should have gotten an email from IES Certified. And that is essentially, like, I have this online training course that I've had for 4+ years That's what that is, iescertified.com. I'm not telling you to sign up for that course. There's a section of that course that I've always maintained, which is my documents and downloads. And everyone here, as a part of your ticket, you're going to be given access, or you have been given access to that section of the training course. So what's in there are a number of documents, very, very helpful documents that people generally find a lot of value in. We have, if you're newer, or if you're kind of by yourself and you don't really have the right kind of contract paperwork for insurance jobs, there's a couple documents in there that'll help you for that, like letter of authorization for mortgage companies, emergency services work authorization, other basic forms that you may find helpful. But also there's 27 different Xactimate estimates for all various different types of projects that I personally wrote. So you have the PDF version as well as the ESX version. And for those of you who are not familiar, and that's okay, the ESX is the data file. So if I were to try to send you and email you a copy of an Xactimate estimate in that ESX format, you can't just really open it up, right? So you have to import it into your Xactimate, but then you can open it up and then manipulate it and make changes to it, so that it fits more your estimate. So if I have 1,000 square feet of a certain item, and you can adjust it to your estimate. But you might find that helpful for items that you didn't know maybe you could use for a project, or maybe the structure of the way that I do estimates might help you. And we're going to cover a lot of that throughout the day too. But also building codes. Building codes, just one second. Let me just pause and take a moment to say that in this business, I think one of the main challenges that we run into with insurance adjusters, okay, is we don't pay for that. That's not covered. That's not covered under the policy. The policy says this. The policy says that. Well, if you don't know anything about me, throughout the day, most of what I'm going to be talking about, I know there's a number of different professionals here and different roles within the industry here, and we're going to find out in a moment. But really what I'm going to be talking about, and what my content is really based around, is looking through the eyes of the contractor, okay? Because I actually believe that the contractor, and that's my former background, which I'll share with you a little bit, I think the contractor actually really does have the most power. And people really take issue with that when I say that. I have a YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Chad Michael, the Practitioner. I hope I get a bunch of subscribers of that. But I have a YouTube channel, and people, they really take issue with that. It's usually from attorneys and insurance adjusters and PAs and appraisals, all of which I love. All are necessary in the industry. But they take issue with that because they're like, oh, the contractor should never be talking about certain things. The contractor shouldn't be talking about the price. The contractor shouldn't be allowed to identify damage. The contractor shouldn't even go out there and talk to the adjuster at all. By the way, none of those things are true. None of those things are true. Those are all myths, and I wish people would stop listening to that nonsense. I think it's nonsense because actually the contractor is able to talk about the price. The contractor is able to identify damage. I mean, if you had like a handyman service and someone called you to fix a screen door, don't you have to be able to figure out what's wrong with that screen door? I mean, come on. If you're a contractor, you be a contractor. You're allowed to identify damage and figure out what's wrong with something, right? So you just can't. You can't negotiate. I don't like that word. Like, you're not a negotiator as a contractor. It may feel like you are with these insurance adjusters, but I want to encourage you to think of it differently, not as a negotiator. Okay, so policy and coverage are like out of bounds. Okay? Like, you could do basically everything, but policy and coverage, when you start talking about policy and coverage with an adjuster, if you're a contractor and you're not a PA and you're not an attorney and you're not doing appraisals and things like that, and really appraisal, but policy and coverage out of bounds, right? So for example, if an adjuster starts saying, hey, that's, the policy excludes this and the policy says that, I will physically repel from them. Whoa, sounds to me like you're talking about policy and coverage. I can't talk to you about that. I'm just a contractor. I can't talk about that. But what I would say, and this is what I'm going to say a lot today, And this is something it may sound very basic at first, but it's so fundamental to everything I'm going to talk about. It's at the core. I believe it's a monumental pillar to my content and to my approach, which is, as a contractor, what you're actually really hired to do is not to go fix a roof, not to go fix water damage, not to go fix fire damage. All those things are going to be part of it, sure, but that's not your primary objective. The main thing that you're hired to do, the thing that you're contractually obligated to do, is this. As the contractor, you are hired to perform all repairs that are prescribed by the insurance claim. Okay? So I'll say it again, like I was hired as the contractor to perform all of the repairs that are prescribed by this claim. Okay? So like if I go meet an adjuster, I'm not there to necessarily shove an Xactimate estimate right in his or her face. That's not, at one time, that was maybe the best strategy, but things changed. And I think right now, I do not, in most cases, think that that's the best strategy. So like if you are going out and meeting with the adjuster and handing them the estimate right away, for your services, I admire you for that. I think there's a lot of diligence and preparation, and I know how much work goes into being able to produce that, especially if it's an accurate estimate. But I would just encourage you to think of it differently. So you can't really provide an estimate if your job was that you were hired to perform all repairs that are prescribed by the claim. So you need to know what is prescribed by the claim first. That's my version of it, okay? So like if I'm meeting with the adjuster and they ask me if I have an estimate, I could say, well, I have the structure of one sort of started, and I use Xactimate. I understand you guys use Xactimate too? Okay, great. So I have one sort of started that I can provide for you, but honestly, I was hired as the contractor to perform all the repairs that are prescribed by you. So I'm really just kind of here to get my marching orders. I'm here to get my instruction list, if you will. Does that make more sense? Like it makes it more simpler, because my entire approach is to let's see if I pulled that out, I'm sorry. Let's see what the insurance company has to say first. Let's let them make their move first, okay? And then we'll respond. We'll react to it. So more than anything, I'm more of a counterpuncher. Like I want to have them make their first move, and then I know how to react, right? But also I want them to come out, and I want them to sort of step in the trap, okay? Not that I'm setting, they kind of set for themselves. I want to see what they're going to approve that I need to even write an estimate on. So that's kind of how I'm going to respond to the adjuster. Like, I need to see what coverage you're going to apply. Like, I need to see what it is that you're going to approve that I need to write an estimate on. So that's more my approach. And that I think you'll find will help you a lot. But here's just one tangible example of why that might be a good idea to not just throw them an estimate. I mean, what if you're working on a water damage claim on the interior of a home, and it's hardwood floor, right? And part of it's damaged, not the whole thing's damaged, but it kind of runs everywhere throughout the kitchen and the living room area, hallways and things like that. And you see that the floor runs underneath the cabinets, right? And you're gonna have to, at the very least, detach and reset those lower base cabinets, which then comes, with a lot of other things. Maybe the adjuster would try to get you to only replace part of the floor and refinish the rest. You've seen them do that, right? Or cut it off at certain points. And maybe they didn't want you to detach the lowers at all, but if they did, their version would just be detach lower base cabinet, maybe a couple of other items. Your version is like, well, yeah, but we have to detach and reset the sink, the faucet, the garbage disposal, the dishwasher, the range, the countertop, the backsplash, the outlets, and all these other things, right? The toe kick, the plumbing fixture supply lines, the angle stop valves, the P-trap assembly, because you know what you're doing and you're putting all those items in, and they're like, oh man, they're gonna go, I don't even know if this is a valid claim or not. Like maybe they were on the fence about whether the floor needed replaced at all. You see what I mean? And so now that they see where you're going, now they maybe are more influenced to just shut it down in the first place. And they kind of see your style. Don't show them your style. Don't show them what you're doing. That's kind of the way I feel. I want to say too, I usually say this in the beginning, is that I don't like this thing, the aspect of this thing that this is a class. I hate that I am like standing over you guys like I'm some sort of teacher. You know, the reason why like the practitioner, someone gave me that a long time ago, is just like, I'm just like you guys, you know? I'm in the trenches, I do this stuff all the time, I've been doing it for 23 years. I'm nobody special. I don't think of myself as like some big professor or teacher, right? So like, what I am is just sharing what I do. That's all I'm here to do. And if you're interested, stick around all day. It'll be great, you know, like that's what I want to do. And you know, with those files, one more thing about that building code. See how I kind of go off track? The building codes, right? So if we have a disadvantage with adjusters, if policy and coverage is off, you know, out of bounds for us, right? Off limits. If we're not allowed to discuss policy and coverage, it sort of puts us as a contractor in the position to where we have one arm tied behind our back. You know, like they sort of have that advantage because they could always just go there with policy coverage, and then we can't go there with them. So what I mean is, like, I don't think you should be saying, hey, Mr. Adjuster, the policy says this, the policy says that. As soon as you start talking about that stuff, you're out of bounds. You know, like that, that's acting as unauthorized acting as a public adjuster, right? In various states, I know we're in a place where you guys are from a lot of different states, right? Illinois, I came from Chicago, the last event. That's the one state to where they can actually be a public adjuster and a contractor at the same time. It's crazy, you know, like they can actually do some of that stuff. But other than that, you can't talk about policy and coverage. There's a couple things where I think you need to know, do they have the coverage, right? Like if you're any service provider, a doctor, dentist, body shop, you know, Safe Light, you know, fix the windshield. I think that it's reasonable for you to check and see if they have coverage, right? But I do not think that you need to be policy experts and going through their policy and interpreting their policy and explaining it to them. I mean, maybe you do that, but I don't think that it's wise to utilize it like in your discussions. I mean, maybe you do understand policies and there's nothing wrong with learning about policy. There's nothing wrong with that and learning about coverage. Like a lot of people go to events that are just about policy and coverage because they want to have that background understanding. So that is important, right? So, but we have one arm tied behind our back with the adjuster, right? I have the equalizer, the neutralizer that gives you that advantage back, that I'm telling you, levels things out with the adjusters, and that's the building codes, guys. It's the building codes. And one of the main reasons for that, it's an arbitrage. It's a weakness in the game because the adjusters don't know anything about building codes, guys. They don't know jack about building codes. So like there are the exception to the rule, of course, like anything. You're going to find, you know, there's going to be a select few that understand the building codes, right? And they know how to apply that to a particular project. And what I'm talking about is ordinance and law, okay? So just said, don't talk about the policy and coverage. This is where I'm gonna say, you need to know about do they have coverage? And that is, do they have ordinance and law coverage? That's the building codes. So everything, if they have the ordinance and law coverage, and sometimes there's limitations and restrictions or other, you know, things that come along with that, or caps, maximums, as far as how much they're willing to pay for building code coverage, ordinance and law coverage, OL coverage, if you will. But listen, they have to pay to comply with the codes. And that's the law. That's the law. So, I mean, listen, Mr. Adjuster, you can't make me break the law. I'm not going to go up there and break the law, okay? So like everything that I do has to comply with those building codes. Now back to your role as a contractor and what you can and cannot do. Can't you talk about building codes? Guys, I would submit to you, you need to understand building codes. Like whether you're doing insurance jobs or not, if you're doing construction work and if you're a contractor, you need to actually understand those building codes. Now, I can say to you, as someone, a former contractor, that, you know, again, 23 years in this business, that I didn't know anything about building codes. I was one of those guys. That's why I can say with confidence to you, like, I'll admit it first, my own flaw. I did not know what I was doing when it comes to those building codes. Like, they were intimidating to me. It seemed like a law book, like it was like a foreign language, trying to understand building codes for me. And you look into the codes and there's all these books that you have to, go and get, and they're like this big, and like I'm really gonna, understand all that. Like I have to take a course where they feed it to me, like I would never understand all those building codes. So it was too complicated for me to open my brain to that subject. And I just kind of felt like, well, the people that work for me, the people that I rely on, they're the experts with the building codes. So I don't need to understand it, right? I just rely on them. But now thinking back, they didn't know anything about building codes either, So I was just like, I had this false sense of security. And in my training course, when I addressed this issue, I kind of almost got choked up. I really do feel bad about it, because I feel like all those years as a contractor, I was providing a service that was not up to the standards of where it should have been. Like I'm sure I missed a ton of items on projects that should have been there, could have been there, would have been there had I have known just a little bit about building codes. So the good news, guys, it's not that hard, because eventually I finally figured it out. It's not really near as hard as what I thought it was. So, I mean, it's in fact, I believe, so simple. Like I can help you simplify that today. I believe that when you guys leave here, you will understand what you need to understand about the building codes. And you can start right now utilizing that right now on every insurance claim, as long as I have the OL coverage. So in the document section and downloads, I have a ton of building codes in there, and they're separated by various versions of the codes, by years. Don't worry about any of that now, because that's not going to make any sense to you. If you want to look at it, great, but it's not going to make sense how it's arranged for you right now. It will when we get to what I call the code game, is a segment of this course today, or this event today, that will dedicate all towards building codes, and it'll all make perfect sense, I believe, for everyone that's here. So, the building codes is an equalizer. It's something that if you've not spent a lot of time, with that, today, that's going to be unlocked, and it's going to be a major piece of value. Speaking of value, I am desperate to provide you guys with value. Like, I'm an over-deliverer. That's who I am. That's why, I mean, you probably see a lot of these events. Maybe some of you guys think, oh, the cost of this event's really high. But if you look around this industry, most events are much higher. And when you go, there'll be vendors all the way around the room, in a bigger room. There'll be vendors, like sponsors set up. If you look around, there's not one sponsor here. It's not what I do. It's what I did 100 of these events in 2019 into 2020. We know what happened there. But it was called the 100 Town Tour. And so now I'm like releasing 10 at a time in cities, but I actually did 100, locations throughout that time frame. And I'm just like, I refuse to do sponsors all the way through there, and still now today, I don't have any sponsors. I've had a lot of people want to sponsor these events. I think I have more people show up at an event with just little old me, doing it by myself. And by the way, Shannon, that you've seen, that's my sister. I don't know if she told you guys that, but that's my sister. I love her very much. She saves me in these things. She does so much work. But we don't use any sponsors. And so I keep the cost low. Don't use any sponsors. I think a lot of times these other events, they'll have a bunch of other speakers too, and they kind of share the platform. And I think most of the people there are the vendors and those speakers, like telling their friends to come, and it ends up being the same people, And I just I think you'll see I'm very, very different. But again, I'm desperate to provide that value for you today. Like sometimes every now and then somebody will be like, hey, I thought this was a course to write, better Xactimate estimates. There's some of that stuff in here, but this is not an Xactimate writing course. I'm very specific as to what's covered on the site. I'm not an Xactimate trainer, Xactware trainer. That's not what this is. It's more about your fundamentals in a lot of different areas. And it's more about dealing with insurance companies, dealing with those insurance adjusters and the rebuttals they throw at you, and how do you respond? How do you carry these things through to get the highest approval amounts possible, and to get approvals in the first place? So that's what it's about. And one of the questions I'm going to get throughout the day more than anything is what do you say when the insurance company says, when the adjuster says, we don't pay for that? What do you? And then I'll give you an answer, and then so well, what if they say this? And I'll give you another answer. And we can just do that all day long, But mostly that's what I think you'll come away with is a handful of powerful value points that you maybe never thought of before. That's what I'm hoping for. It's usually the people that I just turned 45 the other day. It's usually people that are around my age and older that I hear this all the time. They're like, I came because if I just get that one thing that I can take back with me, and by the way, that one thing could be worth thousands of dollars, over and over and over again. But I hope you have way more than the one thing, I really do. So I think, with the documents and the downloads and all that stuff that you'll have, and the estimate examples, I think that right there is worth thousands and thousands of dollars. I really believe that with all my heart. So it's yours. We'll maintain it too as those things change. So it's yours for life. It's included with everything. If you don't have that, see Shannon back there, and she'll get you set up with that, throughout the day. But so between that and the lunch that's provided, if I say anything that you happen to learn, it's good, right? No. All right. So we'll go ahead and get into my main content. I think I just wanted to get kind of an intro out of the way. But before I do that, I want to ask some questions of you and kind of put you guys on the spot. And I won't do this a lot we'll do this one time. But I think if this is helpful, it's a little exercise that you guys kind of know who you're around right now. Know who all is here. It kind of helps out, and it'll help me to dictate where some of the content goes. So who all here is an insurance adjuster? And you work as an insurance adjuster. Okay, great. And I'm not going to put you on the spot too much. Thank you. And you're an insurance adjuster now?
Yeah. Well, I started as a contractor.
Oh, cool.
But I became an adjuster.
I'm sorry. Somebody's phone.
Because when I went to speak to adjusters, I felt like I was speaking a different language.
Ah.
I need to know what they know.
Smart. So you joined the behind enemy lines so you could. But have you been converted over as an enemy? I mean, I'm just saying.
No. No, they a lot of the contractors that I meet as an adjuster said they wish they had me.
Nice. So how long have you been doing that?
Almost 3 years now.
Almost 3 years. Great.
30 years in construction.
Great. So you were as a contractor, that's all your background, brought it over as an adjuster to learn some of the things that they're being taught, like kind of how their background, where it's all based on?
The independent adjusters all have wildly different backgrounds.
Sure.
You think there's a lot of contractors, but there's not.
There's
accountants and
lots of different people, yeah. Kids that are never, like brand new in the industry. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And I didn't ask that to pick on any adjusters, but that's great for other people because I'm sure you'll have people asking you questions at breaks and things, which is also an awesome dynamic to this is the networking factor, I think. There's nobody's going to try to sell you stuff and spam you. There's not vendors and sponsors. Like everybody here is truly mostly like you, and I think that networking aspect is really cool. All right, so anybody here an attorney? Any attorneys here? One attorney? Oh, two attorneys. Great, awesome. Welcome, brother.
Thank you.
And he wants to be a vendor, right? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, brother. What was the other guy here? You're right here. Thank you for coming. You guys are together, then,
Yes.
huh? Same firm, all right.
Yes.
And what kind of stuff do you guys handle? Like this type of property damage?
Restorations are bread and butter.
Restorations are bread and butter. Cool. So this.
We only represent the contractor, no homeowners.
Nice. So they obviously came to the right place, right? There's a lot of contractors here. So any legal questions? I'm not an attorney, right? Consult your own attorney. We have a couple of them here. So welcome, guys. Thank you very much for coming. And I like having adjusters and attorneys so that I can get maybe a little bit of validation sometimes, like, hey guys, am I off base? Am I off base? And they get, we're good. Okay, good. So check me. Yeah, go.
So one thing that you said that I thought was really important is about the building codes. Mm-hmm. So we see that a lot with our contractors.
Yes.
But the other thing to remember is that that's the minimum standard that you have to build to.
Yes.
So
I agree.
regardless of whether it's paid for.
Yes. You still got to do it.
The county, city, whoever you're working for will come and screw you if you don't.
So you still have to do it regardless if they have the OL. So even if they don't have the OL coverage, you still have to comply with the codes as a contractor if you want to do it right. If you want to be a good contractor, right? So thank you guys for coming, and feel free to check me too. If you see something wrong, let me know about it. I don't mind that, by the way. All right, so we got that. That's really cool. Sometimes we don't have adjusters and attorneys, so I like when they show up. PAs, public adjusters. Any public adjusters here today? No public adjusters at all? Where'd they go? I guess they are. I guess they're big. Huh?
It's hard to be a public adjuster
In Maryland. Well, we have different, states here too, but that actually legitimately surprises me. Usually we have a handful of them, in the room. Anybody here handle appraisals with insurance companies or for contractors or for property owners rather? No? Okay. Good. So then how about mitigation companies? Mitigation companies, emergency services. Got a number of those in the house. Welcome, guys. Thank you for coming. And out of those people that just raised your hands, how many of you handle contents? Contents? So content packing, moving, storage, content cleaning. Okay, good. And out of you also, who all of you handle full service build back reconstruction? Okay, I feel like those people right there are actually the true insurance restoration specialists, the professionals. Now, I'm not saying the rest of you are not professionals, but I would encourage you. That was kind of the way that sounded. I try to drag that back in. But I would encourage all of you to think, and I'm going to help give you reasons to think about other aspects of the industry, right? Like that maybe you're not doing. All right, so now out of the rest of you then, I would assume exterior, general contracting, roofing, who all does that stuff? Okay, so like the rest of everybody here, it kind of usually shakes out that way. And then another question, who here utilize or they go the way of getting their owner, their client to hire a public adjuster? Like who here kind of sends their stuff out to a public adjuster? No? Anyone? Sometimes? A couple? Sometimes, all right. There's usually more of those too. And who all utilizes the appraisal process at all? Couple people? Same couple people, right? All right, good. So we have a couple people. Litigation, like you kind of send things out for litigation, get involved in any of that? Of course, these guys, right? They're like, yep, yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. Okay, good. Now that gives me now who all here handles commercial work? Right? Who all here wants to handle commercial work? Like some other people. All right, good. So now this is good because it gives me an idea, and I am surprised that there aren't more people that are utilizing that appraisal process in public adjusters. You're not going to hear me encouraging it. That's not what I do. It's different. I'm not like railing against it, okay? But it's not what I do. It's not what I talk about. Again, I'm back to through the eyes of a contractor. It's too hard for me to get all of my clients, right, as a contractor to, hey, use this public adjuster. You got to call them though, or use this appraisal process. One of the main reasons for that is it just takes too much time for me. And for me, time is money. So like when I was young, I had when I was 21, I had a landscaping company with 40 employees. I destroyed that company, by the way. I ran it under the ground. That was a spectacular disaster. But I had 40 employees, and I thought that I understood time is money. Oh yeah, I get it. I got these guys that are on time clock. Time is money. I get it. But what if I built decks for a living? And I was just a deck building contractor, and I worked for builders, and all I did was just built a new deck every week, but it was the same spec, like the same size, same material, same kind of deal for a builder, right? And let's say every time I did that, it takes me about a week to get it done, and I profit $5,000. I use subs, I use same exact materials, but I profit $5,000 when I'm done. So if you ask me how much I make for a living, I can kind of break that down, right? I can tell you how I do it, and I make about $5,000 a week because I do one of these every week. It takes me a week to do it. I profit $5,000, so I make $5,000 a week. That's what I make for a living, right? But you're smarter than me, no surprise. And so you've identified that, well, what if it rains one week and it takes you 2 weeks to do it, right? How much do you make then? I'm like, oh, I make half as much. I make $2,500 now, right? That's what the concept of time is money that I eventually learned to understand as I got, more advanced in business. Very simple concept, but that's the one I want you to remember. Try to think of things differently. So the longer, like every single day added to this process of getting these claims, these projects from the beginning, the cradle to the grave, every day that's added to that process, it costs you more money. It really does. It costs you, because that problem of taking a job that's, $2,500, like a $5,000, now you're only making $2,500 because it takes twice as long. Imagine if you had a job that's 10 times the size or 100 times the size as that job, right? Or 100 jobs, that even worse, that are like that. They're all taking too long through that process. And I think that's probably another reason why some of you guys are here. Like, how do we move through this process without all this friction all the time? We're always getting the fights. And everything seems like we're going against the grain, against the flow of traffic. And so that's for me, I want to go more with the grain and get it done faster. With my process, it's typically, you're at least getting more money from the insurance company in 7 to 14 business days, mostly across the board. There are always exceptions to that, of course. And I'm not talking about completing it, because that's another thing. If you're handling appraisals and you're doing, utilizing public adjusters, if you go through that appraisal process, typically how it works is once you come to that settlement with the insurance company, then it's done. It's done. So that's it for you. Like, you have one bite at the apple, right? There's no going back to them and getting any more money after that. So with my process, I'm all about first supplementing before the build, okay? So like going through this supplement process, your differences with the adjuster, I believe that has to happen fundamentally before the build. If you're in mitigation, that's hard to do, because like you have to go in there and build, and then you're typically invoicing them for it, right? Think of ServPro or emergency services, that's different, right? Maybe you folks that raise your hand with the roofing, tarping, that's sort of can be a mitigation service. So it's hard to get, you can do it, but sometimes it's hard to do that. Get the adjuster's response before you're going in and building. You have to go in and incur and then invoice, right? But I'm talking about more, there's no emergency. Like, we have time, there's going to be an adjuster coming out. I think you need to go through that process of having those differences, that supplement process before the build. There was a time back in my career where the better move may have been to just build it and then go in with all your proof and your evidence and your documentation and your estimate and your invoice, and then you sort of had more leverage with them. The insurance companies, it's very difficult to do that these days, because I think if you do that, you're sort of giving up a lot of your leverage. Okay. Oh yeah, I'll just use this. Yeah, I'll just use this. Is that better, guys? You guys hear me in the back? I'm sorry about that. Are they coming with that mic?
They're coming.
Okay. All right. I don't like to have my hands tied up. Got some ice. So you got to have that process before the build, okay? You handle the differences before. And then how do you do that? Well, first, if you're handling it before the build, it's not, think about it, it's all hypothetical, isn't it? Because you're talking about, the thing that you're arguing about is an estimate. It's not an invoice. It's just an estimate. It's a prediction of the damages that are going to be, or the repairs that are going to be necessary. It's just a prediction. You have your prediction, and the adjuster has their prediction. But all in all, it's just a fantasy. Does that make sense? It's just a hypothetical. So why are we arguing about this stuff with them during that stage? To me, there doesn't need to be a lot of arguing about it, because it's all just a prediction. So if you come to a disagreement, if you have differences about the prediction, about that hypothetical of what the estimate should be, then we can agree to disagree, and then let's just go build it. And then we'll figure out what it actually is really going to take, won't we? Because then it becomes an actual. It moves from a hypothetical into an actual when we're actually swinging hammers. And now it's harder for them to argue with us, right? And this is where I think the contractor has all the power, because when you go build, the adjuster's not going to go to the job site with you and build with you. They're arguing about, they think that they know what it's going to take to do this job, and you think you know what it's going to take, but I would submit to you, you're probably in better position to make that determination because you're going to be out there, right? So I think, part of my process is, let's find out what those differences are, and then we can isolate their objections and put them under a spotlight when we go build. And now we can prove why it's necessary to actually have those items there. Now we have more leverage. Now we go back. And so people ask me a lot, how many rounds do you go with the insurance company? How many rounds of supplementing, if you will, do you utilize with each claim? The answer, as many times as necessary. As many times. That's the beauty of being an insurance restoration contractor. That's the power of the contractor, is that you can go back as many times as necessary. There's no point where you have to stop. It's like that's your final settlement, that's all you get, you're out. Now they'll try to do that. You will hear that. They'll say, well, that claim is closed. Okay, great, open it back up. You can open back up the claim, because no claim is ever really closed until all of the repairs have been completed and paid for. That's how it really works. Think about, I know just about every one of you probably have been in a scenario where you're with an adjuster, you go through the inspection, the homeowner's there or the property business owner's there, and you go through, you do all the inspections. Sometimes these adjusters will write an estimate on the spot. Some of them will even issue a check on the spot, right? And maybe they're explaining this estimate to your client, the property owner, and you're standing there and you've met the adjuster, you're part of it too. And the adjuster says, okay, so here's the check amount, here's how the payment works. We're going to withhold a little bit of the deductible and the depreciation, and you can get the depreciation when the repairs are completed. And it looks like Chad here is going to do the repairs for you. And Chad can work with us, when we're doing the job, when you guys are doing the job. If anything comes up during that job, if anything comes up during that job, let us know. This is an important part, so I don't want to get interrupted on this part. We good?
If you can adjust the volume as needed.
Sorry, guys. We'll get it together eventually. How's that? That's way too loud.
You've got the other mic on still.
Maybe that's causing it. Well, I still got to have that one on. So. Everything good? It's a little distorted, buddy. Yeah? Good? A little better? No? Distorted? Distorted? So no. All right. No, just do it later, man. We have a morning break. We'll do it then, okay?
All right.
All right. Yeah. There's no more. We're not messing with this right now, guys. How's it go? Okay. You hear me? Okay. Sorry about that. So I don't want to be interrupted on that part because it's an important element of it, right? Is that the adjuster's walking you through, walking with the property owner, explains the breakdown of that estimate and the payment, and then says, if anything comes up during this job, Chad here I see is your contractor, they'll let us know if something comes up, because that's what's called a supplement, right? Like, you've heard this. And so I just need you to remember that if there's always something that comes up on the job, right? There's always something that comes up. So I just need you to remember that just leave it, okay? When you get to that disagreement, when an adjuster says to you, like, let's say you have a job where it's $20,000 on the insurance estimate. You write an estimate that's for 40,000. It's twice the amount, which is no surprise, by the way. It could be 60. Like in my world, it could be way more than that. What I see is that these estimates are always, 100% of the time, they are short. And the reason why they're always short is because they're missing line items. It's not because the estimate software sucks. It's not what it is. I mean, I know the Symbility sucks. I will say that. That does suck. But it's not because of the software necessarily. It usually always starts because items are missing from the estimate. That's always the problem. The problem is always that the items are missing. So, I mean, I have to go through this argument with them, but if it's $20,000, and if I write $40,000 estimate, and we go through that reconciliation process with an adjuster, which is working through the items where we differ on, why do you have this item here? I can explain, I can show you why that's there, right? Or I'm not gonna approve this item. I'll give you this item, but I'm not gonna give you this item. But through that process, let's say that they write their new estimate, their revised estimate at 30,000. So it was 20, yours is 40, and they come up with 30, okay? They're like, hey, I didn't get up to the 40 where you wanted to be, but I did add a bunch of items. I didn't add all the items that you wanted to, but I did add a lot of items, and where I'm at is 30. So I sent you over the estimate. Go ahead and take a look at that, and if you agree to that, let me know, and I'll get a check out in the mail. You guys heard that a lot, right? I see a lot, yeah. So, and what do you do? What do you do? Do I agree with them because it's not up to where it needs to be? Or do I disagree because, I want to get this job rolling. The client's ready to go. We were at 20. Man, we made some progress. We're at 30 now. It's not where it needs to be, but it's a good thing. What do I do? What do I do? Here's what you do. Well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Adjuster. I can't agree to anything. I'll tell you that. I can't agree to anything, but go ahead and send the money. That's what I would say. And let me explain. So what I would say is, I agree that we at least need to do the items that are in that estimate. I think there's going to be some other things that are required. But I'll tell you what, my job is that I was hired to perform, as a contractor, to perform all repairs that are prescribed by you. My job is to perform all the repairs that are prescribed on that estimate that you have right there. I think that more is going to be required, but I'll tell you what, we have to vet this. We have to get it through our estimating staff. We have to prepare and plan for this job. So what we'll do is we'll just proceed right now, okay? And if anything comes up throughout the process, we'll let you know. Fair enough? Okay, great. Because I'm telling you, there's not a lot that they can say to that. There's not a lot that they can say. Send the money. You're not agreeing to anything, okay? So you don't put yourself in the trap to where later on you come back with new items, right? And they're like, oh no, you agreed. This amount, you agreed. You can't have any more, right? They're never going to have me on the record that I agreed to anything ever, even if it's at the very end. I'm not agreeing to any. Maybe a certificate of completion, right? But there's always. I'm always going to leave that door open so that I can keep going back to them as many times as necessary. So my version is send that money, okay? Send the money. All right? We're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and move forward. Our job is to perform all repairs that are prescribed by you. That's what we're going to do. We're going to move forward at this time, and if anything comes up, we'll let you know. That's what I would do. And by the way, I'd go over and pick up the money too. I'd make sure it's in my possession so that you secure the client, and I actually would move forward and start making any and all repairs that can be made. So you're not agreeing to with the client that you're going to go do all these repairs that was on your $40,000 estimate. Oh no, your job is to perform all repairs that are prescribed by the insurance company for the total approved replacement cost value. That's you guys may do other things, and I don't want to break what's not broken. I don't want to fix what's not broken, right? So I don't want to change up your process, especially if you're here with a team. I don't want to rock that boat. But my version is to perform all repairs that are prescribed by the insurance company for the total approved RCV amount. First question of the day, winner right here. He's going to break the ice, and now you guys will start asking more questions. Yeah.
So I get what you're saying there, where you're not agreeing to the scope
Uh-huh.
and then come back to that. But for right now, I have a job that we're doing for Liberty Mutual, and they're using CoreLogic.
Uh-huh.
Okay. The number for pretty much the same scope is about 20% off from Xactimate. Do you have a process for that? Like, how do you argue the cost when they're using a completely different software?
Great question. So he's saying, how do you argue differences in the type of software that they're using?
And I'll tell you, I
Yeah.
did send back the Xactimate saying, hey, you're at X amount a square, literally the lowest number that we've gotten for the year. Here's the proper number that we would need
Yeah.
to do the job. But if you have a different way,
And what did they say?
they haven't gotten back to me yet.
They haven't gotten back to you.
Surprisingly.
So I think that's the right approach, by the way. I think because, there are a lot of, here's another one. There are a lot of contractors who go by what they refer to as the lump sum method. Anybody do that, by the way? Anybody do the lump sum method? And if you don't want to be put on the spot, that's okay. There's probably a couple of you here. Or you've heard other events or groups on Facebook where it's called the lump sum method. And that basically says, hey, look, this is my price for the job, and that's it. So and then the insurance company's like, well, I need a breakdown. They're just like, well, drywall, paint, roofing, this amount, that's what it is. You take it or leave it, And then so there's a lot of people out there where they just kind of make it real basic like that. They don't use a software. They just come up with their own amount. That's their price. And there's a lot of, if you think about retail construction, why can't you do that? There's anybody to each their own. There's nothing that says that you can't do that as a contractor. But the problem is that and by the way, these are people that usually will go through that appraisal process. They'll be like, this is my price. This is it. If you don't take it, we're going to appraisal, right? That's how they do it. And then you end up having an appraiser that it represents the homeowner or property owner, and then an appraiser that represents the insurance company, these third parties, right? They come together, try to make some sort of settlement, and then if they can't agree to the settlement, then a third party umpire that's unaffiliated will come in and sort of make that decision and hand down their order. Everyone has a clause where they can go into arbitration in the policy, right? But once that determination is made, there's nothing else you can do after that. I don't advise the lump sum method. I don't have any problem saying it. I don't care who's offended by it. I do not advise to go that route because I think what you're looking at is nothing but friction with the insurance company, which is then going to take more time. So for me, I just want to go with the flow, right? Like with the grain, with the flow of traffic. I don't want to actually be out there doing a lot of arguing with the insurance company. Why would I? Because my job was to perform all repairs that are prescribed by them. So why would I argue with them? So we come to arguments, we have disagreements, but wherever we disagree, I just isolate that disagreement and then I move on to the next step. So that's not going to make a ton of sense as to why I'm saying that, but it will throughout the day when you see the rest of my process. So I think we're going to get to more into that because I actually have actual insurance claims. Well, we'll go through the Xactimate. I'll bring it up on the screen. We'll show like the inspection, what we came up with, the documentation that was submitted, the estimate that I wrote, the initial insurance estimate, and then how it was changed, how it was revised. We'll do two of those today. One of those is with SimBility, so where the adjuster had SimBility, and so I don't want to kind of give away too much yet, but I will. I'll come back to that. How do you deal with the insurance company when they're using a different software altogether? And I think where you're at is right. You do. I will say, if you're using Xactimate, use Xactimate. And that's why I brought up the lump sum, because what if you were that contractor that was the lump sum method and said, I'm not using your version, I'm using my version, you just have to deal with it, right? So insurance companies you're not required to use Xactimate. You're not required to use, a certain sort of like their pricing software. Like some contractors don't use any insurance pricing software, right? But I do utilize Xactimate. I do believe in it. And I've heard a lot through the years is that Xactimate sucks. Doesn't charge high, it doesn't price high enough. And I can see where you can look at certain items within there, and you look at the per square foot price, and yeah, it seems low. But I think if you have the other supporting items that are supposed to go with that particular item you're using, then it should be more than high enough. You'll see some of my estimates; they're quite high. Okay, and I think my process more than anything is to start from the highest position, because they're always going to knock you down. They're always going to knock you down, right? Like if I was writing estimates for you, and you wanted me to write an estimate for you, just as you can use for the insurance company, just for example, and I get to like 40,000 on my estimate, and you're like, oh, Chad, is there anything you could do to kind of get that down to 35 or 30? Because this adjuster's really cool, and I don't want to upset him. And the thing I would say to you is, sure, I could bring that estimate down, but just so you realize, that adjuster is still going to push you down. I could bring it down, but they're still going to push you down when you go through that process. So I think they're always going to resist. They're almost always. When an adjuster approves 100% of my estimate, I'm like, uh-oh, what did I leave on the table? I left something. That for sure I did something wrong. There's something that I missed. So, but I want to start from the highest position and then end up at the highest position that I can. Now, but not with fabricated fluff and stuff that doesn't belong. Like, I want everything to be so I believe every job site, to me, is like a crime scene that must be investigated. Like think CSI, right? Like the whole place has to be dusted for prints. I want to go there and identify the items that are missing from the Xactimate estimate in the first place. See, they're missing items from the estimate. Remember, that's the problem. That's why the estimate's short. Not because the software sucks. They're missing items from the estimate. Now, it may be that they have seen all of the damage, they know about what needs to be done, but they're still missing items from the estimate. You see what I mean? Or it may be that the inspection itself, they failed to see all of the damage that was there. So how can they have all of the items necessary for the repairs in the estimate if they didn't see everything on the inspection? So if I could have a photo and a building code and an F9 footnote description, like a little footnote underneath every single item, if I could do that, that would be a perfect world to me, right? Meaning, I believe that documentation is so crucial, guys. You have to have documentation. So the one who does the better inspection is going to be the one that gets the higher claims approved. Because listen, if you want to go and learn Xactimate, I know a bunch of people that are Xactware certified trainers. I can send you to the right place. I'm not going to do that. That's not what I do. But listen, writing an estimate in Xactimate is only part of the battle. You can write the best estimates in the world, but it's only part of the battle. Like if you write an estimate, it doesn't matter what you write it for. If you don't have the documentation and the evidence and the proof to back it up, okay, then you're only going to get so far. You're going to have friction, you're going to have resistance, the adjuster's going to... So this is about the inspections, the estimates, and the supplements. That's where that IES certified comes from. That's what I do. That's everything that I do. So we'll talk more about that, but I have a question right here.
On the Xactimate, did you go straight by Xactimate, or did you do any factoring, 20, 30% factoring?
So did I manipulate any of the prices in Xactimate? Yeah, so no, I don't do that. But I will say, in another segment that we talk about today, has anybody heard about the DMO versus RFG differences? Like the demo versus RFG or versus SDG or versus INS or DY. So we're going to get into that a little bit. So and essentially what I'm saying is that Xactimate has a default setting where everything that you're doing, like if you're doing a roof, everything that you're removing, they have it as a default setting of DMO and not RFG. Because that's how you do roofs, right? You come in and you use a demo crew to tear off the roof, and then you come back with a totally different crew to put on the new roof, right? No, that's not what you do. I mean, it's usually roofers that are doing that, but for some reason Xactimate has that default setting. But I don't do, sometimes, right? Like if I'm doing windows that are custom windows, and of course the Xactimate item just has a standard generic, sort of, how's it gonna, is it Anderson, is it Pella, you know what I mean? So I may go in there and
put a 20% factor on everything.
You just put a 20% factor across the board. I may go in there and change the material price that Xactimate says for that particular window.
We do that with the flooring especially.
Flooring, that's a good example. That's another good example, right? And then I'll put a footnote and describe why, and I might put a breakdown of like showing them proof that that's how much this costs. So I had to change Xactimate's material cost, maybe something like that. But generally, I don't across the board change anything within the Xactimate. With the exception of that DMO thing, but I have a whole section of the course of the event that talks about that, which I'll get into later. So I believe that there are 3 phases essentially to the insurance restoration industry. All right, there are 3 phases. We kind of already see where they are in this room, and the first is the mitigation, emergency services, right? Like the stop the bleeding. Like in every, we don't talk a lot about policy, but I'll tell you this, every policy gives the property owner the obligation, the burden of mitigating the damages, like stopping the bleeding. It's actually on the property owner, it's their requirement to go out and stop the bleeding. So if there's water running through a pipe, they are responsible for getting a plumber, if that's what it takes, to shut that off. So a plumber might be in the mitigation industry, okay? If a tree falls on a building, in a storm, and there's water coming in, the tree damage guy might be in the mitigation business. That's why it's like, I think these are all players of it, right? And then you have to get the water out. If everything's wet, you have to get the water out to prevent further damage. So that's stopping the bleeding. That's what mitigation is. Like I said, think ServPro. There's other companies that are here. You're probably like, stop saying ServPro. But think of like Belfour and larger companies that even do international things. These are temporary repairs, emergency. Get in there, stop the bleeding. Right now, if you look in Xactimate, I'll show you a little bit of that. When you look in Xactimate, when adjusters will typically write it up as, like if you have wet drywall, for example, they'll write it up as R&R drywall, right? That's just remove and replace drywall. And if you look at the prices that are associated, that Xactimate will show you a breakdown of what the removal is and what the replacement is. Removing drywall is just one set price. It's kind of a standard price. But there's a whole other category, and that's what mitigation contractors will typically, there's actually 2. But one of them is the WTR category in Xactimate. That's the water, restoration, remediation category. And if you've never looked in there, like you haven't done mitigation, go take a look. It might blow you away, because what you have in there is remove wet drywall, bag for disposal, right? Remove wet baseboard, bag for disposal. There's also without the bagging. And then is it category 1 water damage? Is it category 2 or category 3? And there's certification for these things, that you can go and take to become a water, like a certified water restoration technician, smoke damage, and lots of other. I encourage all of that, by the way. I think it's great. I'm not going to talk about things that'll help you get certified. I'll break it down to layman's terms, which is, let's just think of category 1 as being fresh water damage, like a sink that just sort of overflows and causes, damage to things. That's mostly category 1. The longer it sits, the more toxic that can become, the more damaging that can become, and could develop into category 2, which is a little bit more icky. How you like that? That's my layman term. Or category 3, think of like a sewage backup and black water coming out of toilets and drains and things. Anything that touches has to be replaced, right? And that place has to be remediated big time. That's category 3. But just general mold, like you see things that turned into black spots and mold, that could be category 3. I've done a lot of hurricanes. You come in after the hurricane, the power's off, it's sometimes in a hot part of the year, and there's no air flowing, and the building starts to sweat, and the damages in the roof cause water to come in and through windows and things. And the longer that sits there, the more damaging it becomes, right? And so, like, what do you think is more expensive? The R&R drywall, or remove wet drywall, category 3, bag for disposal? I think you'll be surprised what it actually says. It's a big difference. And so, do I think that if you come in on a roof damage job and there's a water spot on the ceiling that you just, just a little tiny water spot, do you always just go, oh, remove category 3 water damage, bag for disposal? No, I don't think that. I'm pretty reasonable on how I deal with things. But I just want you to know the difference. So for example, that same scenario, that same example with the one water spot, that's inside, and maybe you only do exterior work and roofing, and you go in and you do an inspection and they're showing you a water spot, and you're like, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, that'll be fine. You could just kills over that, put some kills on it, and you won't have any problem at all. Like, we're gonna do your roof, so don't worry about that. Listen though, how did that water spot get there? Let's think about this for a second now. Because the water came in through the roof. So how did it get in, first off? And what did the water do before it got there? Did it sit in bird waste and go on down through the, algae and other things, and then it permeates down in through the opening in the roof, and then maybe it passes through rusted metal and rotted wood, right? And it goes through insulation, damaging all of those things too, by the way, and compromising the R values in the insulation. And then it gets through, and it's gravity, right? So usually you see these water spots that are around the cutouts, like light fixtures, openings in the ceiling, right? If you think of just a drywall ceiling, you would see those around registers and smoke detectors and light fixtures and ceiling fans, because the water's looking for a place to get out that's already cut out, like an opening. But sometimes it doesn't make that, and it just ponds on the upper, so if you got up in the attic and cleared out maybe insulation that was on it and saw the other side of that drywall that's not primed and painted and doesn't have texture all over it, what do you think that looks like? Like if it sat there and ponded, and then so much so that now we see that water spot on this side. Do you think the other side's good? So we're just gonna kills this side and forget about the other side and forget about the insulation. So what I'm saying to you is, it doesn't matter how big that water spot is. I believe that water spot needs to be cut out, okay? So not the whole ceiling if it's just one water spot, but we have to cut out that area, that piece of drywall right there, remove that piece of drywall. We have to remove the insulation. We have to treat the whole area and apply antimicrobial agent, right? We have to replace the insulation. We have to replace that piece of drywall. It has to be primed, textured, right? And the entire ceiling needs to be painted, right? So wherever the ceiling runs in a continuous run, we're not just gonna paint that one section, we're gonna paint the whole ceiling. If it's popcorn texture, we're removing all the texture in the whole ceiling, in the whole room, right? That's a big deal. Knockdown, we don't need to do that, we can blend it in. But to do this, we have to deal with those contents, don't we? So the contents, we have to get those out of the way. We have to mask and cover the floor. We have to mask and tape along the perimeter where the walls meet the ceiling. These are things that all have to be done, regardless if those items are in the estimate or not. See, you're paying for those items. You're doing those items. If you're using subs or employees, you're paying those people to do those items and do them properly. If it's a high ceiling, if you don't put high ceiling in there, you're still paying for it. If you're using scaffolding and other things, you're paying for all those items. But so you may need to do that too. As far as having all of the other items that are required in there, right? But now look, if that water spot is touching the wall or it's even close to the wall, then essentially when you're tearing out that piece of drywall, you're gonna damage the paint on the wall. So now we have to deal with the wall, right? So now we have to, mask and tape down along the baseboard, and we have to paint the wall. We might have to, and by the way, we have to detach it on the ceiling, we have to detach and reset, I forgot to say, all of the registers, light fixtures, ceiling fans, smoke detectors, detach, reset. I know the insurance company's gonna try to get you to mask and cover. I think it's better to do it detach and reset, but even at the mask and cover, at least we're addressing these issues, right? We're addressing them. But if we're into the walls, now we're detaching and resetting shelves and mirrors, and maybe in a bathroom towel bars and toilet paper holders and towel rings. All these things have to be done. Door stops, every bit of it has to be done. The doors themselves, So I just think that most of the time the adjusters are missing the proper items from the inspection, so that's going to miss a whole bunch of things. And maybe they did do the inspection, but they just have, contents, move out, then reset, small room. There's no plastic, there's no tape, there's no prep work in there. It's just spot paint, So I think, that's part of the problem is how do you deal with, what's the protocol to actually deal with this, with the damages to begin with, And it's helpful to know about these phases of the industry, the emergency services, the mitigation, how Xactimate breaks those down into other categories. If you're doing roofing, I've got one for you. So I've done a lot of hurricanes. I mentioned that, like 15 of them. Hurricane Michael, I was in Panama City, and they had 150 mile an hour winds, from that hurricane. So it was devastating damage. And I went in about 2 weeks after the hurricane, and what I'd heard was, what I'd heard is that it hadn't rained much after that storm. Like, it rained a little bit with the hurricane, but then after it moved through, it had only rained like once, but it was later. Like, it was a week or so after. And what I noticed right away, driving through every street, just kind of surveying the damage that was out there, was in front of most every building, like every house, every business. What I saw was piles and piles and piles of debris laying out in the front. Like, they had trash pickups that they scheduled the city on certain days. And so people would just take all their stuff and just move it out by the curb. And you saw this big pile of wet drywall, insulation, carpet, furniture, cabinets, just amazing, the extent of the devastation. And a lot of trees, from the outside, they'd had them all piled up. But think about this for a second. Why did that happen? Why did that happen? We should only really be dealing with roof damage and siding damage and windows and doors, not drywall and insulation and carpet. We should have never had that problem, guys. We should have never had that problem. I mean, instead of being on the news talking about, hey, beware of contractors, BBB, check them out on the video. I mean, say that. Go ahead and say that, but also say, hey, homeowners, property owners, you need to tarp your roof immediately. You need to tarp it, okay? Like, you need to seal it in and get it waterproof. And the reason for that is because drywall, insulation, carpet, furniture, they're not actually waterproof. Isn't that amazing? Like, it's a common sense thing. But what you'd see is like, you would see some buildings that had a full tarp on it, because if it's 150 mile an hour wind, the whole roof needs tarp, guys. There's not like, you don't focus on just where the shingles are missing. Like, the whole thing is devastated, believe me. Like, the seams are ripped apart. So if it rains, that water's gonna go right into the building. So in that instance, all of those roofs needed to be 100% tarp. I worked Hurricanes Gene, Francis, Charlie, and Ivan in 2004 in Central Florida. Would anybody go back that far? Anybody in those storms? No? I noticed the older I get, the less and less hands I see going up. More and more young people. But that was my university. But I noticed at the time FEMA had a program. It was like a blue roof program or something, where every tarp, like every roof, had a blue tarp on it, and it was 100% tarp. That's mitigation. That's why I bring that up, right? That's mitigation. That is temporary repairs. If it was a Belfour job or a ServPro job, chances are it was 100% tarp. But mostly I was seeing little patches of tarps, like single tarps on the roof, and that was not doing anything. That's like even worse. They hired a contractor, and the contractor came out there and put his incompetence on display. We're gonna go. I mean, because listen, Xactimate charges by the square foot for tarping. So why would you go out there and put a 32 square foot tarp on? What are you gonna get paid for that? I mean, there's an emergency services call, but like, if you're doing it for money, if that's what you're doing, then, which I don't think that needs to be your number one reason all the time at all. I think that definitely does not need to be. But if you're doing it for money, you didn't make much money, So I think it needs to be, you're doing it for the right reason. You're doing the right job to protect the home, helping your client, especially if their obligation is to mitigate the damages. So one of those files in there is a tarp estimate, guys. And I think it's like I want to say it's like 30-something squares. It's a small roof. It might be less than that. But it's 2-story, it's steep. So when you're doing a tarp estimate, it's remove and replace, because you'll have to take it back off when it's time to do the roof. But it's by the square foot, the entire roof. Now, I don't think you need to do the whole roof if a tree hit the back of use your best judgment. But if it's a large hailstorm, like, which part do you tarp and then which parts do you leave? I mean, it could be directional where a side did not get hit, so I get that. But if the whole roof was hit by large hailstones, you're going to have to tarp the whole thing. If you're worried about it, right? If you're worried about it at all, contact the insurance company first. Give them the opportunity to approve it first, right? But for the most part, and if there's rain coming, then you could set off the alarms, but it's by the square foot, and then you have steep charge, you have 2-story charge. If you're doing it correctly, you would install lumber around the perimeter so that the tarp can go over it and run water off correctly. So that would be more, fees in for that. There's roofing labor hours for all the penetrations to make sure that they're all waterproof and watertight and sealed up. So, if you're doing a proper tarp, I think that tarp in there is like, I don't know, $13,000, something like that. So use that tarp file in there because if there's major damage in your area, first start thinking about the mitigation factor, all right? And those emergency services work authorization forms, which they come from Xactimate. That you can get those right out of your Xactimate profile. But there's a Word document you guys can use in the documents. Take some flyers and some of those and go around and, if you have door knockers doing that kind of thing or people out in the area, hey, I can get a tarp on your roof, and that's mitigation. So you can typically direct bill to the insurance company for that, right? So we can get a tarp on, you don't have to pay anything. I can dispatch my tarping crew and get it over here, sign this form. It's you can work your own kind of system for that. But think of the service that you're providing. You're mitigating the damages. Now, do the insurance companies now have to pay for all that when all that stuff's sitting in piles in front? No, they actually don't because they're required to mitigate the damages. Now, what I've seen is that they always do. They always do. So for as much complaining as we're doing about insurance companies and insurance adjusters, think of the hit that they do take for that. They end up paying for that stuff. Now, I don't feel sorry for them, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I feel sympathy for them. So, okay, you have your mitigation, right? And that's the first phase, mitigation, and then there's contents and reconstruction. Those are the 3 phases. So in my version. So contents, I'll spend a moment with that right now, is that contents, I missed the boat when I was a contractor in this. I just got to tell you. I was sick when I figured it out. Okay, 1 second. I'm going to finish this segment and then I'll take my break, okay? So as the contractor, the mitigation is the first phase, second is contents, right? I missed the boat because anytime somebody had contents that they needed moved out, well, first, the insurance company just usually said, move out, then reset one room, right? And so that made it difficult. But I didn't realize what was really in contents. So if you go to CPS in your Xactimate, the contents, packing, and storage, and there's many other categories of contents, that just blew me away as to what was all there. Now, I used to have an estimate writing service, a company. I was the first one to have one in 2010. It was a virtual estimating, and I was a general contractor for 10 years before that, and started in sales. I went down and worked those hurricanes in 2004, and that was really my university. I didn't do well at first in roofing sales from a hailstorm in Ohio, where I'm from. But when I went down to that hurricane, that was a whole new thing because I was kind of thrust into all of these factors, all of these phases. But anytime that somebody had contents, my client would say, hey, what do you want us to do about these contents? And I'd be like, well, you don't want us to go through that. You don't want our people to be touching your contents. So you pack it up and we'll move it out of the way for you. That was generally my response. Like, I had no idea. So early on in my estimate writing days, I had a contractor who he did smoke damage and contents and that kind of thing. And there was a typical kitchen fire just on a 3-bedroom home, which I kind of missed that too. Smoke damage, right? It's toxic, leaves a soot all throughout the house. So it may be that an entire little kitchen fire like that, the entire house has to be cleaned top to bottom. And I don't mean like cleaned by cleaning service. I mean, I'm talking, the door itself has to be, this is all in Xactimate, CLN is the category. The door itself needs to be clean. The door hardware, the door knob itself, the lock set, every item needs to be clean. The register needs to be clean. The ceiling fan needs to be clean. The windowsill, the window, everything, the trim, the casing, the floor, everything needs to be clean. It's toxic, it's soot. It may be, that you have your attic framing needs to be sealed with an odor control shellac, or you might need that throughout the house, depending on how bad it is. But all of the contents now need to be dealt with. So that's what this guy had, and he needed a bunch of clothing and upholstery and curtains and bedding and things like that all had to be sent out, cleaned professionally with ozone treatment and brought back. And then also the contents all had to be packed up and like the furniture cleaned and moved and stored somewhere. So that's what the CPS is the packing, moving, and storing. So like I said, well, buddy, I can do this for you, but I really don't know how to do it. I've never done it before. I've seen these items in there. I can give it a shot. And he's like, well, I have all the inventory. It shouldn't be hard if you can find the items in there. So I'm like, okay. So I had to do one estimate for the cleaning and then another estimate for just the packing and the storing. Well, what I came up with, I saw all there's like women's fancy blouse, baby's bib, crib lining, like men's suit jacket, lazy boy chair. I remember there was a Budweiser lighted sign. I didn't find that, but I found neon lighted sign. You would be amazed at all the items that are actually there, like coffee maker, clean inside out, alarm clock, clean inside out. There's a lot of items in there. So I did that, got through the process of farmer's estimate. I'll never forget. And I was alarmed because each estimate was $20-something thousand a piece. It was a total of $43,000. And so that was going to be way more than the damage that had to be done for all the cleaning and painting and everything on the inside. And so I'm thinking, at the time, I'm charging based on the amount of the estimate. So I'm thinking that this contractor is going to laugh me out and he's going to think I'm just trying to get over on him, right? And the other thing I'm thinking is that Farmers is never going to approve this, So I tell the guy how much it is and how much he owes me. He's like, yo, no, that sounds about right. Send me over the invoice. I'll get you paid. And so I was like, okay, so I'm thinking he doesn't know what he's doing, He sends it through to Farmers, and they approved every dime, like quickly. And that just blew my mind. And I will say, I must have left something on the table for them to approve every dime, right? One second, but that blew me away, guys, because I was stunned by the potential that I now learned that was in the industry that I've been in for so long, but then I was devastated by all the money that I'd left on the table throughout the years, One quick question here.
So,
yeah.
As an ex-adjuster, the thing you left on the table was those people probably should have gotten 2 weeks paid at the mother house.
That's ALE, right? He's talking about other, that's additional living expenses. I did know that part. I knew that they paid for them to live in other places. I had that one down. I'm a Hilton Lifetime Diamond member. That's to do most of my events. That's a key right there. Like, I would always try to get my clients free upgrades. Hey, I can get you a 2-room suite, get you free breakfast on there. But yeah, we're gonna take a little morning break here, and then the final phase, reconstruction, right, is the build back. I think, most of you guys know what that is. It's pretty self-explanatory, but that's, if you're a roofer, that's a category you're in. If you do exterior general contracting, right? But all right, we're gonna take a break. My sister desperately wants me to take a break. 10 minutes. You guys want me to too, right? 10 minutes, guys. We'll see you back here. It's about, we'll be back here in about 5 till, and then like I said, lunch will be at noon. And then we're gonna turn up the value from here. I think we're kind of